I speak for all Miami Heat fans when I say, thank you, Florida Panthers. Truly, thank you. Listen, if you're a South Florida sports fan, please do not take what the Florida Panthers are doing for granted. They just won the Stanley Cup championship last season, and then just yesterday, or at least at the time of this recording, they made the Stanley Cup finals again for the third year in a row. Now, I support all the South Florida teams, although for my life, I've really just been a diehard of the Dolphins, Miami Hurricanes football, and of course, the Miami Heat. But over the last few years, as the Panthers have been building this potential dynasty, I've really been getting into that franchise as well.
Got it. That's game. Ain't no way to get it out of that. Game, baby. We champ for the world.
Because the type of run that they are on right now, again, should not be taken for granted. But last year in Game 7 of the finals, as I watched the final seconds tick away and see the Panthers hoist that glorious trophy, and then just yesterday as they rallied back to win Game 5 and advance to the Cup, I couldn't help but think, damn, I wish this was the Miami Heat. Bill Zito was hired to be the Panthers GM in 2020, and since then has put on an absolute masterclass on how to build a contender. So in today's video, I want to talk about their rebuild and see what the Miami Heat can take away from that. So I've outlined how the Panthers built this dominant powerhouse that they have today, and we'll help explain that in Miami Heat terms.
But not before the 55.9% of y'all that are not subscribed to the channel hit that button, because your support is greatly appreciated. Now let's get back into the video.
From 2001 to 2020, the Florida Panthers only made the playoffs just 4 times and won 0 series. They were basically stuck in NHL purgatory, where they were not bad enough to tank, but also not good enough to compete. So I ask you, Heat fans, does that sound familiar? Because before Jimmy Butler and after Jimmy Butler, it kind of feels like the Miami Heat are stuck in NBA purgatory. They are the definition of mediocrity, and because they refuse to tank, well, it's kind of hard to build a contender. Now, it's not impossible. We're looking at a team like the Indiana Pacers, who never really bottomed out, and they did lose Game 5 today to the Knicks, but they're still just 1 game away from the NBA Finals, so I'm not saying that it's necessary to tank, and the Florida Panthers didn't even necessarily tank. But point is, both of these teams kind of started in mediocrity, and they have to work their way out. Now, there is levels to mediocrity, though, because a team like the Florida Panthers only went to the playoffs 4 times in 19 years, where the Miami Heat are pretty much consistently in the playoffs every single year. So there is some differences there, but let's move on as we advance into the Panthers rebuild, where once Bill Zito got here, he wasted no time at all. Immediately, he traded the franchise cornerstone, Jonathan Huberdeau, who at the time was the all-time leader in Panthers history for total points. They traded him and the elite defenseman of Mackenzie Weegar for Matthew Tkachuk. Now, Huberdeau and Weegar, they were great, but they really weren't built for playoff wars, which kind of reminds me of Tyler Hero. Is that flaw of me to say? I mean, Huberdeau means a lot more to the Panthers than I think Tyler Hero does for the Miami Heat, but in the grand scheme of things, Tyler Hero is beloved by a lot of members of Heat Nation, and he's hated by a lot as well, but there's still a large portion of the fan base that stands him. I think the front office loves him because Hero has survived the Damian Lillard allegations, the Donovan Mitchell allegations, the Kevin Durant allegations multiple times. He keeps surviving trade deadline after trade deadline, so very clearly he means something to the Miami Heat. When there's a lot of people like myself who, as much as I love Tyler Hero and how he grew up with this city since being drafted as a rookie at 19 years old, and I appreciate everything that he's done here and all the great moments that he's had, I understand that he's not built for playoff wars in the same way that Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar necessarily weren't. So although it's very difficult to let go of a guy like Tyler Hero, who you've developed this relationship with over the last 6 or 7 years, it is time to move on from him for somebody who could actually be the guy like Matthew Tkachuk. Because Tkachuk was younger, he was tougher, he thrived in high-pressure situations, and to me, that kind of sounds like Donovan Mitchell, who it sounds like the Heat maybe didn't want to trade Hero for. It sounds like Damian Lillard, who the Heat also didn't want to trade Hero for. And you may be saying, hey, Donovan Mitchell got no rings. He gets ousted in the playoffs early every year. Damian Lillard been to one conference finals. He got no rings. But I think that's more so the teams that those guys were on. I guess for Mitchell's case with the Cavs, they were literally the best regular season team. So they had a good team. But in the postseason, it's not like Mitchell played bad. It's not like Dame played bad. Both of those guys were consistently playoff risers and had incredible numbers in the postseason. But for other varying factors, they just didn't have playoff success as a team because it's a team sport. But both of those guys are franchise risers. But the Florida Panthers, they pulled the trigger. They made the hard decision to get rid of Huberdeau, brought in Kachuk, and he instantly became the face of the franchise, whether he was scoring clutch goals, igniting comebacks, and setting the emotional tone. So I think that's the first step that the Heat have to do is find their guy that could be the culture again. Now, the next thing that the Florida Panthers did is they found tons of undervalued players, or I guess they found good value players and guys who were overlooked is maybe a better way to say it. They got Carter Verhaeghe, Sam Bennett, Gustav Forsling, just to name a few. Another guy that they had was Brandon Montour, who was on the championship team last year, but unfortunately they weren't able to afford him to retain him for this season. But that was fine because they continued to give other guys more playing time that they had previously or just added, whether it was Eetu Luostarinen, I always have trouble pronouncing his name, but him. You also got my guy Nico Mikola. Both of those guys really had bigger roles this season and really shined when they got that opportunity. So the Panthers were not really built off tanking. It was more so smart scouting and taking these calculated risks. Although I do want to point out that that isn't all true because Aaron Ekblad, Alexander Barkov, those guys are pretty good. Not sure if you heard of them. And Ekblad was actually the first pick in the draft 11 years ago. And Alexander Barkov was second in the draft. That was 12 years ago. So it's really crazy to think how the Panthers have kept both of those guys for over a decade now through some really, really bad or mediocre times. Where in the NBA, you never see a team hold on to a guy for that long. That's why like Damian Lillard was the rarity. He was the one guy that didn't run from the grind. That's why that was a thing because he's the only guy that never asked out and didn't have success. But in the NHL, it's a little bit different because of the contracts. Right now, Alexander Barkov is in the middle of an 8-year deal for $80 million, meaning that he's only getting $10 million a year. I say only in terms of NBA money. It's not a lot of money. So only $10 million a year, which is about 10% of the salary cap. Matthew Tkachuk is actually getting paid a little bit less per year. So less than 10% of the salary cap, but he's also on an 8-year deal. So they have these guys locked in on these good value contracts for a long period of time. Meanwhile, you compare that to Bam Adebayo, who is literally about to get paid when his extension kicks in. 5 times more than Barkov and takes up 30% of the salary cap. And obviously Tyler Hero's due for an extension. If he gets the max money he wants, he'll also be making 20 to 30% of the salary cap, which is way too much. And because these guys are on shorter 3 to 4 year deals, it means that when their deals run out or they cut their deal a year short because they have a player option or that they're up for an extension after only a couple of seasons, it means that they're due for new contracts so soon, which means that they get paid even more money so soon because you can't lock them into these long-term good value contracts like the Panthers did with Tkachuk or Barkov. But I do understand that in the NBA, you need to pay that much to get stars. You need to pay 30% of the salary cap. We understand how that works, but you should do it for a true superstar. So if the Heat can get a 1A this offseason, they will need to fill out the rest of the roster with good value players like the Panthers. So you get the guy, you pay the guy, not Tyler Hero. You already paid Bam Adebayo, that's too late. Get the guy somehow, pay the guy. And then you fill out the roster with those good value players, which the Heat have been very good at for a while. Think about all the undrafted guys they've developed. Duncan Robinson, Gabe Vincent, Caleb Martin, Max Strus. Now, you think to the Panthers, they had a lot of, guys like that for good depth on the roster. But then when you couldn't afford to pay Brandon Montour, you didn't overpay him to stay. And I think the Heat should learn that lesson of not overpaying these non-needle moving role players to stay. They made that mistake with Duncan Robinson, who has had a bad contract for the last couple of years in terms of his production. Now he's an expiring contract, so you finally might be able to move him after all these years. But I do think maybe the Heat already learned that lesson from Duncan, because they didn't overpay to keep Max Strus or Gabe Vincent, and they tried to overpay Caleb Martin. Fortunately, his whole agent messed that up. But at least they didn't overpay for these role players, because just like the Panthers found some other guys to take those spots, the Miami Heat should continue to do that as well. Maybe they already have some of those guys on the roster, like Kashad Johnson or Drew Smith. And the final thing the Panthers did in 2022 was they instilled a culture of toughness, because in the 21-22 season, they were great in the regular season. They had 122 points. That was the most in the NHL, which of course means they got the President's Cup. But in the playoffs, they were exposed by Tampa Bay, where they got swept in round 2. At the time, the Panthers head coach was Joe Quenneville, and he had to step down for some other allegations from a previous team he was on. But once he was out of the system, the Panthers brought in Paul Maurice, who brought structure, accountability, and a defense-first mentality. Under him, the Panthers became a playoff team all season long, not just on paper, meaning they played with that physicality every single second that they were out there. Prior to him, you had a high-flying offense, but once he came in, he developed a responsible, punishing type of hockey system. Before him, you had regular season stars. After him, he developed playoff killers. There's levels to this. And the players really bought in, especially Matthew Tkachuk. So you made this monster trade for a guy who was not only super talented, but he fit the type of tough culture that you wanted to instill into this franchise. And he was a playoff superstar. That's what the Miami Heat need. They need to get a guy who fits their culture and is also very talented in the terms of playoff success, in terms of being a superstar when it matters most. That's kind of what I always said about Jimmy Butler. We always felt like that was a match made in heaven for his first few seasons here, because he was tough, he was gritty, he was hardworking, and all those other adjectives: toughest, nastiest, meanest, most hardworking team in the NBA. All those other adjectives that describe the fake Heat culture that was once a thing, but now it's just a marketing scheme. Jimmy Butler was that until he quit on his team, and then that all randomly went out the window one day. But when he still believed in it, you saw the success that this Heat team had, going to multiple NBA Finals under his leadership, another Eastern Conference Finals, because you had a star that was a playoff riser and fit the culture. So 3 things that I think the Miami Heat can take away from the Florida Panthers is: 1, do not be afraid to trade some of your lovable guys for a true superstar. Number 2, do not overvalue guys who are not worth it. Trust your development system. Stop overpaying for guys who are not needle movers. That's how you get in salary cap hell. And then number 3, bring back a culture of toughness, because it frustrates me so much. They wear these damn Heat culture jerseys and then get blown out by 55 in the postseason. That team had no heart to finish the season. And the fact that they even make Heat culture a thing is just ridiculous, because it's not no more. It's a marketing strategy. That's the truth. But I think you got to instill that toughness back with guys like Davion Mitchell. Get some more guys like Davion Mitchell. That would be a good start. Now, I guess another lesson I could say that the Heat could learn from the Panthers is patience, considering Barkov and Ekblad have been stuck here for over a decade. And to that point of patience, I'm not opposed to keeping Tyler Hero or Bam Adebayo. I think they're good players. You just can't overpay them, which maybe you already did Bam. It remains to be seen what they will do with Tyler Hero and his extension. But more importantly, get them their true 1A. Get them their Matthew Tkachuk. And I should also point out that Alexander Barkov is that guy. He is him. So he's also a 1A. So the Panthers have 2 of them. Or I guess they have a 1A and a 1B. Oh, that brings me back to some good times. Anyways, that's really all I got to say for this video. So let me know your thoughts down below. What are some other things that you think the Heat can take from the Florida Panthers? And more importantly, what are some steps you would like to see the Heat take to get back into finals contention? Hope y'all enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, because I'm on a grind to hit 8,000 subs. That being said, I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace out, everyone.
Look, pull up in your city, tryna get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need a head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.